Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Night has fallen and the most rambunctious dogs have fallen silent. The lights in the windows of the houses have gone out. Silence. A tension hung in the air. Only occasionally, somewhere in the lilac bushes, a night bird, breaking the complete silence. Anna, still a young woman of about 30 years old, sat on the porch of her house and gazed into the night sky. And there shone such stars, which are only in August. It seemed as if someone had scattered grains across the sky. It was cold. Anna ate, lived, and drew back more tightly into a light shawl. Yes, summer is gone, soon to be cleaned up by rains and then by frost. Sad and painful. But the pain on Anna's soul is not from the changes of nature, but from the fact that she was left all alone. It had been 40 days since she had buried her beloved husband. Anna looked at the stars and remembered how she and Michael used to sit on the porch at night like that, and the sky above them was the same. Sometimes they'd see a shooting star. Michael always managed to make a wish, but she didn't. Then her husband laughed at her, saying, "Your wishes are too long." She could have wished for something simpler. How could it be simpler? She just wanted a child. But it wasn't meant to be. With her husband, they lived almost 10 years, and all this time they dreamed of becoming parents. The doctors gave them some diagnosis, prescribed additional examinations, and all in vain. Anna and Michael even went to the capital to the luminaries of medicine. And they didn't help. Anna remembered how she sat waiting for the results of the tests, how nervous she was. The result was the same: infertility. And sometimes it seemed like she was going crazy. Sometimes she would walk down the street and peek in her stroller. She loved looking at those angels so much. She imagined that like that herself would one day walk with a stroller. But fate was inexorable. She was barren. Michael once mentioned that maybe he could take a baby from the orphanage, but Anna resisted. She honestly admitted to her husband that she could not love someone else's child. Yes, she likes to admire children, but she can't bear to take care of one she didn't give birth to. She cannot cross that line of squeamishness, which the birth mother does not even think about, because it does not exist for her. Michael understood his wife and did not insist anymore. So they lived in their village, a good life, I must say. Michael was a hardy farmer. Anna worked in the village library, where they moved immediately after marriage. And in general, they were both city dwellers in the village by chance. It's just that when they got married, Michael's business in town was in trouble. He had a small auto store, and it was bringing in a decent income. And then the recession hit. And then Michael realized he was starting to run his business at a loss. And then Anna's grandmother died in the village, and they left her a house. Grandma Olia had lived in Marginov all her life. It was her mother's paternal grandmother, a nice old lady. She was very worried about her death, and her husband consoled her. His support was very important at the funeral. Michael looked around the countryside, talked to the locals at the wake, and realized that there was a free niche for farming. But they didn't know how to use anything and wanted to sell it all. Would someone buy it? So Michael bought the shares by selling his business in town. Then he took a loan and started to develop in the village. Anna supported her husband. As a child, she liked to stay with her grandmother in the village. And secretly, she always dreamed of a quiet life away from the noise of the city. Of course, Michael and Anna's parents did not understand the children, but they did not ask them. It was only over the years that it became clear that Michael had done everything right. He was able to restore what had been destroyed for years. The machine yard was equipped with modern machinery, and the current during the harvesting season was humming day and night. So much so that the whole village could hear it. But nobody grumbled. On the contrary, people rejoiced. After all, now there is work in the village for them, and all thanks to Michael. Michael had a lot of energy. Only here on Earth, he suddenly realized that business does not necessarily have to be done in the city. In the village, too, everything can work out quite well. Next to Anna's hut and grandmother, he built a good house. Together with his wife, planted a garden. After the farm, Michael planned to develop one more thing: to plant an orchard, so that not only apples and cherries grew in it, but also apricots, pears, Grapes learned to rattle his garden for the whole region, and maybe even further. For this, Michael began to study horticulture. For hours, he could sit reading special literature. He even has a huge corner for this in an old shed. It was converted into a study. There was a light and a chair at the table, and even a stove. For the period of cold weather, Anna was perplexed about it. Is there not enough space in the house to make an office there? Everything is more comfortable. But Michael laughed in response. So he is closer to nature, which he studies. He laughed, but Anna asked him not to go into that very shed, saying that he had books and records there. Anna would suddenly start cleaning and confuse everything. In short, in Michael's absence, the shed was always locked. The wife was not offended. She understood that it is not necessary to distract her husband from his new ideas. And Michael, after the main work, all read and read books for gardeners. Several times went to the nursery of the region for a consultation. He was already halfway to his next dream. He's even drawn up a plot of land for a future garden, and everything would have worked out, except for one thing. That tragic evening, Michael had a bad backache. During the day, he helped the men unload sacks of cement into the cowsheds. The floor needed a touch-up in one place. The man thought he was just working. He was tired of carrying sacks, and they scolded him. That's why he grabs every job. There are hired laborers who get paid for it. Michael just waved him off, saying, "How could I not help as fast as I could? All the more rain on the nettles the cement could dip us." They only sighed, then put an anesthetic cream on my husband's back and got ready for the bedroom. Michael said he would work a little longer. I wanted to buy a new combine for the farm, and there was a chance to get into a program where you can do it with benefits. But you have to gather a lot of documents. So Michael was making sure all the paperwork was in order. You don't take care of yourself at all. Anna shook her head. Your work isn't going anywhere until morning. I'll just sit here for a while. Michael smiled weakly and wrinkled his nose. But my back hurts. Let's go to bed. I'll just sit up for half an hour. Her husband promised her, and she left. Then she berated herself for not waiting for Michael. Maybe she could have helped. But that night she only touched the pillow and fell fast asleep. She was tired too. With the house and the library, she had enough on her mind. In the morning, she opened her eyes and a strange anxiety gripped her heart. Michael wasn't there. Had he been working all night? Probably fell asleep in the living room on the sofa. What kind of a dream is that? He'd be like a plague all day. She got out of bed, went to the living room. Michael was lying face down on the floor. At the first second, Anna thought that he was sleeping like that, and then she felt as if she had been electrocuted. It was unnatural. She rushed to her husband and froze, and he was already swinging lice. They screamed. Then Anna screamed like a woman. Her neighbors heard her, came running, helped her. Then in the morgue, they told her that Michael's heart was like a rag and was running like an 80-year-old man's. Why? Why? Because Michael had never complained about his heart, never drank, never smoked, never got nervous over nothing. To which the pathologist reasonably pointed out he never complained. That doesn't mean it didn't bother him. Yeah, Michael was like that. He didn't like to listen to his ailments. He gets sick, takes a pill, and goes about his business. He was on fire with his work, so he burned out before his time. Heart attack, and death. It wasn't his back that hurt that night. It was his heart screaming. But they didn't hear it. Anna just didn't think it could happen. City friends came to bury Michael. All the village came, other farmers came, district leaders, even was all respected Michael, sincerely worried about his departure. But it was especially hard for Michael's parents. They could not believe that he was gone. After the funeral, Anna's parents began to insist that she return to the city, but she refused. She would not give up Michael's case, of course. She doesn't know much about it, but she would look into it. And for that, her husband's parents were grateful. Farming was more than a business to Michael. It was his baby, and it was sad to wind it down. Maybe Anna will be able to keep and increase a good name. Michael will continue to be remembered. And so it's been 40 days. While the farm was in the field, James, the farm manager, was in charge. He had a lot of experience in farming. He'd grown up in the area. She could count on him. And yet the woman was only now beginning to realize what a heavy burden she had taken on. Anna stared into the night sky. The thoughts in her head were one sadder than the other, and the one above didn't come off. A bright star. Interesting, but this time it flew for a particularly long time. Or so I thought. At least she managed to whisper the cherished words. What women and herself did not immediately realize, and then even collapsed herself. Why should she do all this now that Michael know? Now she's alone and all her life will be like this. No one and no one else is needed. The widow never again on this most painful topic to even think. But her heart couldn't be stopped. Yes, Anna whispered that night. I want a child. The star went out. Anna shivered in the cold. What are the temperature swings in August? Hot by day, cold by night. All right. The main thing is that there will be no frost. It's still early. She sighed again, got up, and went into the house. She had to go to bed. Tomorrow, she had to go to the library and then to the field. James, though he is good, but she has to get into things herself. Tomorrow, the men go to work. Everything is ripe, and there, look, and the wheat with the minimum will come up. A lot of worries, and maybe it's good. There is almost no time for sadness, and heavy thoughts recede. But falling asleep, she still sobbed in 3 streams, remembering her husband. How much she loved him, and still does. All night they dreamed as if she was rocking the baby. She could even smell the sweet smell of his head. The baby looked at Anna and smiled. She woke up with a smile on her lips. She remembered the dream and wondered who was the boy or the girl. She never realized, but the feeling of maternal happiness still did not pass. As if I really held my own baby in my arms. But who was it? Anna did not know, but only remembered the eyes of the child. Surprisingly reminiscent of her husband's eyes. The memory of Michael immediately wiped the smile from her lips. Yes, it was a good dream, but now it was definitely not redundant anymore. Anna sighed heavily. She got out of bed and settled into the kitchen to prepare breakfast. What's the point of making it? A cup of coffee and a cheese sandwich. For her alone, that's all she needed. In the kitchen, she grabbed the first mug she could find. Her hand froze. It's the car's favorite. And this is the little spoon he always used to hang sugar with. There's still a little old spoon on it. Inherited from Anna's grandmother, it's old, but so memorable. While the kettle is boiling, the woman sat down on her husband's former place, by the window pressed this very spoon to her lips and thought. Maybe her parents were right to insist she return to the city. Everything here reminded her of Michael, and that made it so painful and hurtful to realize that she would never see him again, never hear his voice. The kettle had long since gone off, and for all she sat staring at one point, I'm not going anywhere. Finally, she said loudly, as if someone else could hear her, and reached for the kettle. Yes, life goes on, and that life is connected with the village. After drinking her coffee, she quickly got ready and ran to the library. Cindy was waiting for her at the closed door. To her, she was going to hand over the files. To be honest, Anna was a little shocked in front of this elderly woman. Cindy had worked in the village school all her life. For many years, she had been the headmaster, a bossy, soft-spoken woman. But at the same time, if she spoke, it was always to the point. Cindy was respected by everyone and her opinion was listened to. For 3 years, as she took a well-deserved vacation, she did not think to work. And then Anna decided to leave the library. It was difficult to find a new responsible worker in the village, but no one wanted to dissuade Anna. Everyone realized that if the farming business folded up, everyone in the village would have a hard time. We had already gone through this stage, and so the chairman of the village council went to Cindy with a request to take over the duties of the librarian at least for a year. Cindy thought for a while and agreed. Indeed, who else but her? You can't leave the people in the village without spiritual food you delay. Anna, she said, and they instead of greeting. Oh, I'm sorry, Anna replied, out of breath. I didn't calculate a little time, I overslept a little. If this is how you will manage our household, it's not good. For sleep the field does not like. I will take into account, peacefully answered Anna. She wanted to answer Cindy something harshly. What's wrong with an ex-principal? Well, he's got a lot of socializing to do. There was a lot of work to do in the library. While we checked all the books against the catalog, while we waited for the commission from the district, while we formalized all the necessary paperwork. In short, we got out of that old library. Anna was Cindy. When the sun was already rolling down, lighting up the red sunset, the livestock had already returned from the fields of trouble. Left mistresses hurried to the barns. Nodding scoundrels, somewhere laughter could be heard walking youth. Soon it would descend again that night. I didn't have time. I'm in the field today, Anna remarked sadly. I hope James himself will quite right himself. That one will do fine, replied Cindy. Sergei can be relied on. He's a good agronomist and a good manager, but he still needs an assistant. He doesn't know how to work with documents, and he hasn't learned how to talk to his bosses. He'll manage. Cindy looked questioningly at her companion. They were walking along the evening street. The August chill was once again covering the village. How could it be otherwise? Cindy, I can't let Michael down. Quietly, she answered. That's right, nodded the former principal, now librarian. Then Cindy looked at Anna carefully and added in a softer tone, Honey, why don't we have some tea? Yes, that's a good idea. Anna nodded in confusion. Let's go to my place. I really don't have anything prepared. We'll think of something. What's to think of? There is boiling water. That's good, Cindy answered cheerfully and smiled slightly. Anna looked at her companion with different eyes. Now she did not seem strict, even stiff. During this day at work, they had even become friends a little. No, Cindy is not an iron woman, as she was called by many ordinary women in the village. She smiled kindly, almost like a mother. They went into the house. Anna was fussing in the kitchen. Cindy, in the meantime, walked through the rooms. Nice house Michael fixed, noted the guest, going into the kitchen. Everything is so thorough, solid. Well done. And you, and a great hostess. It's cozy. Who needs this coziness now? Barely holding back tears, Anna replied. I do not want to be in the house. Everything reminds me of Michael. Tomorrow, I'll go to the office at dawn and then to the field. It's good that you are so eager to take on a new job, but you can't tear your heart out. Cindy sat down at the table and looked at her hostess carefully. I know it's hard. Everything reminds you of your husband now, but how do you want it to be? Anna looked at the guest in surprise, and she continued, First of all, take away all his things. Hide it away. Secondly, why is Michael's picture still in the living room? But that's how it's supposed to stay for 40 days. While the soul, they say, says goodbye to home. It's been longer than that. Take the picture down. Easy for you to say, Cindy. Anna exclaimed. How can I? It's like betraying him. These things are pictures. The only thing that warms the soul. Nonsense, you say? Cindy frowned. Then grinned sadly. That's easy for me to say. Do you know what I had? And then over a cup of tea, the former principal told her story. When I was young, when I was still in the institute, when I studied in the city, I got married for the first time. She loved her husband to the point of madness. She was expecting a child from him and was about to take a sabbatical leave. For this reason, when disaster struck, her husband was hit by a car. He died afterward in the hospital. And Cindy had a late-term miscarriage. And after that, the doctors said she was definitely not going to have any more children. The young woman was devastated. The light faded before the eyes of her beloved No, and the meaning of their life was lost forever. Then her mother came and took Cindy to the village. Here she recovered a little, then graduated from the institute by correspondence, went to work in a school. And then one day in the district center at a teachers' meeting she met Peter. He taught math in another village. Young, interesting man, colleagues whispered widower. His wife died in childbirth, so he raises his son alone. The boy is only 3 years old. Cindy, when she heard about it, she felt sorry for Peter and the baby. She remembered her own story. After the meeting, they accidentally ran into Peter at the local cookery shop, where Cindy had run in for a cup of tea. They smiled politely at each other. Peter offered to sit next to them at a table. They talked about professional topics and ate beliashi. That was the end of their first communication. Then they met a few more times for work. and then Peter came to visit Cindy for the November holidays. They had a nice time. Cindy's mom liked Peter very much, and Cindy herself realized that she was attracted to Peter. Anyway, the four of them spent Christmas with Cindy, Peter, his son Kevin, and his mother. They got married in the spring, and they've been together ever since. Cindy and Peter are soulmates. Kevin from the first days of Cindy mother and calls Cindy became, and he became for her the only and favorite son. It's been many years now, and all is well with them. Guests in town for a long time, a big boss to his parents on holidays. With the whole family comes his wife. He and two daughters, Cindy adores granddaughters, and the arrival of his son is waiting impatiently. You marveled, Anna. I didn't know you didn't have a son. No one ever said anything to me about it in the village. He's my own. Even though I didn't give birth to him, Cindy smiled. They say people because it's forgotten, I guess. I've become a real mom to him. Kosti knows everything, but it doesn't matter to him. That's the way it is. Why did I tell you all this? Anna, you must understand that life doesn't end with the loss of love. And as she was leaving, Cindy repeated Anna's phrase, life doesn't end. Remember that. As Anna fell asleep, she remembered the words of the wise principal. And in the morning, waking up, she was going to her new job. James was already in the office. When Anna appeared on the doorstep with the first day of work, Anna smiled. Old agronomist in the field with me, will you go? Or will you stay here? Anna nodded. I want to study the documents. And James agreed correctly. I can handle the men myself. The paperwork's harder for me. You can ask Wendy if you need anything. Wendy is an experienced accountant who has worked in the office for many years. Indeed, during the day she helped Anna to understand many questions, but it was still clear. It would not be easy not from the librarian and farm manager to retrain. But the young woman suddenly as a spirit perked up and realized that she will succeed. After all, around good people who will help if anything. Yes, Michael picked the right people. Anna returned home in the evening, tired from the documents, even a little headache, but it did not shake the new manager's confidence in her abilities. She decided to have a little rest and to sit with the papers at home, as Michael used to do. He had never bought that combine. Now he would not have time to get it at a reduced price. But the winter season is ahead. We have to think how to keep the cattle safe and sound. She was thinking about work when she crossed the threshold of the house. And then the sadness came over her again. She was alone again. And Michael's eyes from the picture in the living room were so penetrating that it made her want to howl. Anna remembered Cindy Nikolaevna's advice that she should put away all Michael's things. And the woman decided to follow that advice. No more grieving. Life goes on. Putting aside the documents she had brought with her, Anna brought 2 large cardboard boxes from the pantry and began to put away everything that reminded her of Michael. She put the souvenirs and her favorite mug and spoon. Last, she took the portrait with the black ribbon, a farewell letter. She whispered and kissed the picture of her husband and put it in the box. Anna decided to take everything she had collected to the very shed that Michael had converted into an office. It was dry there. No snow in the winter, nothing should go to waste. Anna took the key and turned on the shed and the lights. It was her first time in this barn. After Michael had remodeled the place, that's the kind of obsession her husband had. He thought of this place as his territory. Anna even mentally apologized to the deceased for trespassing. And then, putting aside all doubts and superstitions, mistressly looked around the room of the box. She decided to place it on an old cabinet that lurked in the corner of this small office. By the way, from the inside the shed really resembled a workroom. The walls husband paneling gypsum, cardboard, and painted in a neutral color on slabbed floors, put cheap carpeting. The furniture is old, but quite suitable for the working area. Michael knew how to organize space. Anna was surprised that Michael had organized everything so well. She, too, was always at work, library, or household chores. Why had Michael never once bragged to her that there was a decent office inside the barn? Why had she never been allowed in here, having identified the boxes on the cupboard? Anna sat pensively in the chair, looked at the desk, smiled sadly. There they were, gardening textbooks lay the table a stack, and next to them thick notebooks. She picked up one of them, adorable. Turns out Michael had been outlining reading. There were also notebooks with some lectures. Apparently, former agronomy students took them, probably from James too. Anna put the notebook on the table, moved its edge, and immediately heard something fall from the table. She bent over to see it was a small, neat-looking key from the desk, driven by curiosity. Anna picked up the key and got a better look at the desk. There were no closing compartments at first glance, but as she opened the largest door, she saw a small compartment that was locked. And that very key came up. The lock inside clicked. Anna froze. Had her husband hidden something there that she could not know? For all the documents, money, and so on. There was a normal safe in the house. Probably nothing. Something to do with gardening, nothing more. So Anna decided, pulling out a small drawer. In it lay a general notebook rolled up. The woman carefully picked it up. There were no inscriptions on the cover. She opened the notebook. From the first lines, she realized that in front of her was her husband's innermost secret, which she had not even guessed for 10 years. Anna had never imagined that her Michael, her beloved husband, could be hiding something from her. That's what the tape said. She froze in suspense and read page after page as if swallowing the information. It was Michael's personal diary. It's considered shameful and ridiculous for a man to keep a diary. I used to think so too, but then I realized that only by putting my thoughts on paper I could at least talk to someone, at least to myself, because I could not share it even with the closest person to me, my wife. And so Michael's diary began. Anna read her husband's diary and realized that her husband had another life, another woman, with Jenna as the name of that other woman. Michael had known her since childhood. They studied in parallel classes. In the 9th grade, the first romantic relationship between them began. And after the graduation party, they had their first time. Michael loved Jenna very much. He almost idolized her. He even wanted to follow her to law school, but he didn't get enough points. Good thing there was a shortage of technical schools that year. So Michael became a student after all. But they saw Jenna less and less often, and this made Michael very sad. But she was quite calm. And then Michael saw her behind someone else. He drove an expensive car up to her driveway and got out with a gorgeous bouquet of roses. Jenna hung around his neck. At that time, Michael, a mere student, could not please his beloved so much. Is a car and flowers the most important thing? He then walked up to them and just looked Jenna in the eyes. "What did you want?" The girl laughed. "You're just a friend. And William I love for real." The friend swallowed his resentment and asked Michael, "How was everything between us?" "Just an experience." Jenna shrugged and jumped into the car with William. "Boy, have you figured it out?" Condescendingly asked his new suitor, Jenemiah. "I don't advise you to go to her again." And he too got into the car, and they drove off. And Michael stood there. Yes, he wanted to scream, to run, to throw a brick at the car as it drove away. But he held back that night. He got drunk for the first time. So drunk he couldn't remember himself. The next night, he had a conversation with his father in the kitchen. The father persuaded that Michael would have a carload and a small cart of such duties. The son didn't agree. After all, he loved for real, and the father only sighed and shook his head. Time passed. No longer Michael did not seek meetings with Jenna, and she did not seek meetings. Soon he learned that his ex had married the rich man William. It hurt and hurt the guy, and he decided that he would never let any girl into his heart again. Yes, there were romances, but they were non-committal. He also chose girls simpler. After the institute, Michael tried to do business a little. It worked. On the personal front, everything was the same. Then he met Anna honestly. At first, Michael decided that she is one of many a little play in love, and he will leave her at first sight. Anna didn't hook Michael in any way, just a gray mouse, a graduate of the Art Institute, future librarian. But then there was some kind of breakdown. Yeah, Anna wasn't beautiful like Jenna. But Michael realized that not a minute went by that he didn't think about her. Her beauty wasn't external. It was as if they came from within. Her eyes. Michael was simply drawn to that blue pool. And yet it wasn't love. That's what he thought true love was in his life. Then one day he met Jenna. She and her husband came into his auto parts store. The husband, of course, didn't recognize him. But Jenna pretended not to recognize him. And only when her husband was distracted looking at the label of an expensive motor oil, she quietly asked him if he were living alone and smiled condescendingly. "I'm getting married soon." Immediately answered Michael. "Why did you say that?" "Out of spite, I guess." "No, he wasn't going to marry me." Jenna shrugged her shoulders when she heard the answer. That made Michael angry. She didn't care. Neither did he care. But that same night he proposed to Anna. God, how happy was that girl? Michael wrote in his diary, "I thought she just looked at me like I was God, and I was. I was a little ashamed. I swore my love to her and my chest was empty. I loved another then and then loved another when I came out of the registry office with her. And then when she cuddled me at night." Everything changed when the first problems appeared in Michael's business. Anna was so sincerely worried about her husband, tried to calm him down, encourage him. That's when he drew the first parallel. And how would Jenna behave in this situation? Of course, she would have run away without thinking. Anna was there for her. She was not afraid of poverty or problems. She readily supported her husband when he expressed his thoughts about moving to the country. Anna was ready to follow him to the end of the world. It was only in the village that Michael realized that he really loved Anna. It was only then that he realized how beautiful she was. And it wasn't just her bottomless eyes that charmed her soft skin, thick russet hair, slim waist. Or maybe she had only gotten more beautiful over the years. Anna was also a wonderful hostess. She cooked deliciously. The house was always so cozy. And she never complained about the lack of money or the hardships of life in the village. At night, Michael embraced his wife with special tenderness, and during the day he worked and worked. And now they do not know the need for anything. The house, carting, everything is in it. Michael, an honorable man. Yes, he wanted children too. Very much. If Anna's problems had been discovered at the beginning of their life together, he would have left her without a second thought. But now he couldn't, because without Betty there was no point to his existence. Then 2 years ago, he suddenly met Jenna. Michael had just gone into town to pick up another shipment of parts when he suddenly saw her walking down the sidewalk. Yes, he recognized her immediately, though she didn't have her usual glossy, tired look. Michael drove behind her, slowed down. Why did he do that? He didn't understand. Perhaps he wanted his former lover to see his expensive car, and he himself looked quite presentable. So she'd see him and bite her elbows. Jenna recognized him and really changed her face. "Hi," she said, confused. "Hi." He smiled for a ride. Jenna agreed. And then, sitting in the interior of the car, they had a conversation. Jenna told him that her husband had left her without money. She didn't graduate from college. Now she works as a cashier in a supermarket. "How are you doing?" shyly asked Jenna. "I'm doing fine," Michael smiled. "I'm what they used to call a fist." "Married?" "Yeah, sure. But no kids yet," Michael answered briefly. Jenna was silent and then cried. Michael was confused, stopped the car, began to calm her down, and then everything was a blur. A cheap hotel room. A hug. When Michael realized what he had done, he immediately got ready to leave. "The room is paid for 24 hours and I'm getting dressed," he said to Jenna. "You can stay, and you're holding out?" She asked. Now she looked content and happy, and almost as beautiful as before. But Michael couldn't look at her. He was ashamed in front of his wife. Betty was the one he really loved. This was all just a misunderstanding. "I have to go home." Without looking in her direction, Michael answered. "We'll see each other again." "No, forget the whole thing. How can you not do this to me? You've always loved only me, haven't you?" Jenna shrieked. "That was a long time ago. What happened today? A mistake. I only love my wife. I'm sorry." Saying this, Michael left the room, leaving a crying Jenna behind. Was it her? Pity. A little ashamed of his behavior. But on the other hand, now they were even. He tried to forget about the story. But after a while, Jenna called him, found his numbers through mutual friends. "Hi," she told him, "I'm pregnant." "Congratulations," he said. "What does that have to do with me? It's your baby." Of course, Michael didn't believe it and asked Jenna not to call him anymore. But she did not calm down and sent him a text message the next day that she would tell his wife about everything. And that's when he called. "Don't you dare call my wife," he yelled into the phone. "I don't know if we're canceled, pregnant, or not. What we had between us was a mistake. And I told you about it. Jenya, you child, even if it is mine," then already dropping the conversation. He regretted his words a little. After all, he and Anna did not have children, and there was no chance either. But what should he do? Recognize Jenna's child. But then they would find out everything. He couldn't hurt her that badly. That same night, he discreetly took his wife's cell phone and drowned it in the lake. Let her think she'd lost it, and the next day he bought her new ones with a new SIM card. So he hoped that Jenna wouldn't be able to get to Anna. It paid off. No one bothered Anna. Jenna did not call him until 9 months later to inform him that she had had the baby after all. "I wasn't allowed to abort," she explained and laughed into the phone. "I still want a family and children in the future. Let that puppy of yours suffer. Let him suffer." I couldn't believe my ears. "Michael, what did you do with the baby?" "Put it in a home," just answered Jenna. "Was he skinny?" "No, if it was healthy, I would have kept it. You'd still be recognized as the father in court, and you'd be paying good child support. But it's not fun to throw your life away with a sick kid. So adios." "What orphanage did you leave him in, gritting your teeth?" Michael asked. Jenna didn't answer him anything, just laughed back and hung up. Michael stayed up all night. He thought about what he should do at that time. He equipped this office in the barn, began to study gardening, and thought how to be. Here he could quietly talk about everything to himself, to at least talk it out. And he began to write this diary. He described the past, thought about the future. He couldn't share it with anyone else. "I was afraid of hurting Anna. It's better not to talk to men in the village. Men are sometimes worse. The most talkative women." In the end, Michael still decided to search for the child left behind by Jenna. Yes, it was difficult, but small bribes at the city maternity hospital and the guardianship department helped. He found out where the boy was. He was already 6 months old at the time, and no one was in a hurry to adopt him. The whole thing was that the child had big heart problems. At 6 months old, he had already undergone one surgery. Another one was required, but it was already paid and the money was exorbitant. Even if Michael had sold all his property, it would have been unlikely that he would have remedied the situation. Meanwhile, he had genetic tests, found out the son was his. But what about before he didn't confess to Anna about the affair, and now he's shocked her with a seriously ill son? Michael decided to keep it quiet. He simply began to regularly transfer money for the treatment of his son in the very orphanage, and at the same time looked for ways to find money for the operation. Yes, things have gotten tough financially, and the household has to stay afloat. And they must not guess that there is another expense item. So Michael worked and worked hard, but he made it through. Only one day his heart couldn't take it. Michael's diary ended with these words, something bad. "My heart was so stamped today. I can't imagine that my Jack could have the same pain. I'm a grown man, and he's just a baby. But it's okay. I think I found a foundation that's going to help my boy. And then I'll find a way to convince Anna to take him in. Yeah, my wife won't know it's my son. Maybe I'll admit it to her someday, but not now." That was the end of the diary. Anna reread the last sentence several times. Tears ran down her cheeks from behind Jenna's page. And yet he loved her, only her and that poor boy. God, how hard was it for Michael? Why didn't he confess everything to her? Maybe together they could have figured out how to help the baby faster. Yes, it was a lover's baby, but it was also his son. Turns out, how much did Michael love her Anna? He kept quiet, kept silent, and agonized over his infidelity, and undermined his heart. And now he's gone. But somewhere there is a little boy with a bad heart too. Anna cried and realized more and more that she was not jealous of her husband for Jenna. It was a mistake. An obsession, a hello from the past. For that matter, Michael, Anna whispered. How could I? Why did you pity me? I'm strong. I could handle your betrayal, but you couldn't live with it. But I promise you I won't abandon our boy. Yes. For Anna, somehow this unknown baby had already become her own. Even though he was born to someone else, he's the child of her lover, and she will definitely save the baby. At night, she dreamed again that she was rocking the baby. And now she knew it was a boy, and his name was Jack. She could even see his face. Yes, the baby looked remarkably like Michael. In the morning, Anna woke up still early in the morning. She washed her face, dressed quickly, and got ready to go to town. As she was driving her car out on the deserted street, she was met by James in his SUV. Where are you going? The manager of the office on the other side of the street was surprised. To town, James, to town. You can do it without me. She answered and drove away, leaving the faithful assistant in complete bewilderment. It's no use having a mistress like that. James sighed and went to the machine yard, where the mechanics were already gathering to go to the field. She was already in town by lunchtime. From her husband's diary, the woman knew which orphanage Jack was in. That's where she headed. The guard at the orphanage explained how to get to the manager, Camille. You're Michael's wife, the principal asked incredulously. An older woman, when she introduced herself, why didn't he come himself? I am his widow. Anna said quietly. Oh my God. Camille splashed her hands. What's the trouble? What happened? Anna explained this. Apparently it's hereditary with Jack. Camille caught it. I don't know if we should talk about everything. I know that my late husband's son is in that orphanage. I'm not the boy's mother, but I'd like to help him. Can you tell me what needs to be done? Camille lowered her eyebrows and looked intently at Anna. So you want to pay for a second operation? I know Michael was going to do it, but the amount is enormous. Did you find the money? Not yet. I don't know all the details. My husband hasn't told me anything, but I want to finish what I started. The boy is innocent and shouldn't suffer. Yes, you're right. I'll tell you everything I know. Michael found a foundation, but they can only give a portion of the money for the boy's treatment. Camille gave the details and the coordinates of the foundation, and then suddenly asked, would you like to see the child? Anna confessed very much. Only if it is not allowed at all. But I think, as an exception, you can. And soon he was standing by Jack's crib. The baby was asleep. The woman's chest ached. Yes, the baby was like something out of her dreams. Only now it wasn't ephemeral, made up, but real. The baby turned and opened his eyes for a hum and again a ringing in her chest. At Anna, she saw Michael's eyes to the baby approached the nanny, busy with the baby. Anna headed for the exit. I will definitely find a way to help Jack. Anna said goodbye. Camille stood looking after her for a long time. Did she think she was a saint or blessed? Her husband, it turns out, cheated on her, and she forgave everything, and was ready to save the child to her lover. I guess she loved her husband so much. After the shelter, Anna stopped by her parents' house. She didn't hide anything and told them about Jack and the foundation. She also shared her thoughts that during the period of everything she will have to sell the farm. And most importantly, after everything, she wants to adopt a boy. You're an idiot. Mom's up. It's not your child. You decided to sacrifice everything. What are you going to live on? A librarian's salary. You've already lost your place in the village, but you haven't found one in the city yet. Weren't you the one who urged me to go to the city after Michael died? That reminds me. Anna did, but not with someone else's child. This is Michael's baby. A child born out of adultery and cheating on you. Mom, I know he's repented of everything, and you know my problems. And this child is from your lover, who will not help you in any way. And how will you be alone with a child without a penny of money, after the sale of the farm is not quite without a penny? I'll manage somehow. She'll manage. The mother got even more angry and called the father out of the room. Father, at least you tell me. The daughter says everything right. The father called back. And a few seconds later, he appeared in the kitchen. I liked Mike, but he's a pain in the ass, you know. It's his Jenna that you don't get jealous of. They despise them. Anyway, daughter, do what you think is right. Your mother and I will support you. My mom gasped at that answer and shut up. Everything was decided for her, and then she shrugged her shoulders. And maybe everything is right? Yes, the decision to adopt Jack came unexpectedly. She was surprised herself. After all, until recently, she thought that she could not love a child who was not born to her. But seeing Jack in the orphanage so small and defenseless, her heart trembled. No matter who gave birth to him. And his mother will be given to him in care and love. From her parents, Anna went to Michael's parents. Those were very surprised to see the former daughter-in-law on the doorstep. And then fussed in the room, spent. They started to set the table. No need for anything. Anna stopped them. I have a serious conversation with you. You knew Michael had a child. How? Dumbfounded mother-in-law? I've never heard of it. And she told me about Jenna. Michael's parents listened. Then they admitted that their son had an affair before marriage, but they preferred to keep quiet about it because the breakup was very painful for him. For Michael. So this Jenna girl is back in his life. His father-in-law had collapsed. What a cuckoo, wiping her tears, added the mother-in-law. And you, daughter, you're a good girl for doing this. And thank you for telling me about your grandson. We now have a sense to live on. We'll save the boy together. You bet we will. That day, Anna stayed overnight at her late husband's parents' house. And in the morning, we went to the hospital to learn all about Jack's disease from the doctors. The doctor told us that the baby needed a new operation. We had 3 months tops. That's not what the doctor said. That's before he's actively crawling and walking. After that, the strain on the heart will increase, and things could be very bad. But is it impossible to perform such an operation within the quota? Anna asked, although she knew the answer approximately. Yes, that's what the doctor said. There are quotas, but they are in the general queue, it just will not wait. Who are you? A relative of the patron's boy. The doctor clarified. You understand, I have no right to divulge information to a stranger. Not yet, but I hope it's temporary. How so? The doctor frowned. I want to adopt Jack, but you realize it will be a problem child. Maybe this expensive surgery won't be the last. I understand. From the hospital, Anna went to the very foundation she had hoped for. But there the woman was told that the sum was too large, and the queue ahead is huge, and all children need urgent help. So she was at a complete loss. Anna returned to Mariana. It was already evening when she drove up to James' house. He had just arrived from the field. When he saw the new mistress, he frowned. Anna looked a little too tortured. James, I guess I'll have to sell the farm, she said with a sigh. Then she told the manager the story of Jack. James listened, shook his head at the difficult situation. No, of course you can sell everything, and the farm with all its assets is worth a lot more. But you can't do anything yet. It takes 6 months for you to come into the inheritance rights. Yes, that's right. It's just slipped my mind. I don't know what to do. The woman's completely confused. He's Michael's son. How can I leave him? He's so little. James wondered. If there was time, he could wait until late fall and then sell the crops to resellers for more money. But almost all of it. What do we save for seeds? And how to feed the cattle in the winter? Let the whole dairy herd go under the knife. But how can you do that? And them. And this is definitely Michael's child. Careful. Asked him. That's right. I found a genetic lab certificate in his files. Oh, and he didn't say a word. Yes, he surprised me too. Anna replied and took a sip. What are you doing? James fatherly embraced Anna and stroked her shoulder. Don't cry. It hurts from all this, Anna admitted. I'm kind of spinning. Recognizing worrying. It's basically a child born as a result of my husband's infidelity. No, I'm not jealous. I'm just hurt. It's okay. It's okay. Your soul will rest in peace. You're doing the right thing by rushing to help the baby's birth mother. She must have been an asshole. She refused in the hospital. God will judge her. Don't you worry so much, girl. We'll work something out together. Maybe we can save the farm. James was right. Soon all the farmers in the area knew that the late Michael had a sick son. The men themselves organized a collection, involved their acquaintances, and those slowly, but the money began to collect. Anna, who was torn all the time by trips to the city hospital, was tired beyond belief. She was grateful to the people helping the boy, but it was only a drop in the ocean. Michael's parents were not left out either. They even took a loan to help their grandson, but the money was still not enough. And then one day Anna's mother came to the village. Betty was initially skeptical, but seeing that her daughter could not be stopped, she had to get involved. She arrived at the end of September. Anna had just gotten back. Laughing only where they finished drying barley tired. She just poured herself some tea. There was a knock at the door. "Mom." Anna was surprised and immediately turned pale. "Has something happened to Daddy?" "No, Daddy's fine." Mom shook her head. "I want to help you. I'm sorry I didn't accept the situation in the first place. You know, I'm a difficult person. I wouldn't forgive betrayal anyway. You're different. I see you're struggling with this little guy. Camille called me, said they saw a boy. He looked like Michael. It's true, the kid had nothing to do with it." "Mom, what are you talking about?" Anna answered a little irritated. She was tired from a hard day's work, from the calls from the clinic. And then her mother arrived. I guess she decided to blow her brains out once again. That's what Betty replied and opened a small bag. From it, her mother took out an old jewelry box. Anna had never seen it before. Betty put it on a chair and opened it. When Anna looked into it, her eyes widened. The box contained antique jewelry, rings, bracelets, earrings. It's gold. She could only ask her mother gold. Betty smiled sadly. Earrings with real emeralds. "Mother, but where did you get such splendor? We've always lived modestly. You're just a teacher. Dad's a factory worker all his life. And my grandparents were simple laborers, as far as I can remember." "Yes, we're from a simple family." Betty nodded. "But your great-grandmother Adriana worked at a rich merchant's house when she was young. Then the merchant fled abroad to England, I think. And Adriana helped her pack before she left. And when everything was loaded into a wagon to the house, men with pitchforks and axes came. The merchant and his family barely managed to jump into the wagon, but I guess he overdid it. The horse, from pain and fright, rushed as hard as it could. Some things flew out of the wagon, and the merchant woman couldn't hold a small bundle in her hands. It fell right under your great-grandmother's feet. The merchant wanted to return it, but the angry men were running after them. So they left. Adriana pushed the little bundle under a bush. When the men went into the house to do their chores, I managed to pull it out and carried it home. And there she realized what she was holding so tightly in her hands. It was her jewelry. Adriana didn't say anything to anyone at the time. At first, she was afraid they'd blame her. She thought she was serving the merchants, so she was in league with them. But then she decided to let the jewelry lie there, waiting for its owners. She really wanted them back. But the years passed. Adriana married a good man, a real communist. One day she confessed to him that she had some real treasures. Timothy swore that she didn't give everything to the new authorities at once. And now how to explain where it all came from? He argued and then buried this box in iron barrels in the garden under the apple trees. Out of harm's way, it stayed there for years. And then the war. My husband went to the front. Life was hard in the city. Adriana and her daughter were starving. One day she dared to use the warehouse, dug out a jewelry box. She chose simpler jewelry at the market, then exchanged it for food. A week later, she received a funeral for Tim. "Oh," Adriana cried. She blamed herself. She thought it was because she had taken someone else's jewelry, and they had taken it from her again. And she buried the box. Never got her hands on it again. Then Adriana and her daughter were given an apartment in a well-equipped house. And on the old plot, they arranged a summer house. And only shortly before her death, she told her daughter about the treasure buried under the apple trees. But she strictly ordered to keep silent and never use this wealth because it was someone else's. Betty's mother remembered her mother's words all her life. She told her daughter about the box only before her death and again ordered her not to touch the jewelry in case the owners showed up, and not to tell anyone so that no harm would come to her. Betty had a superstitious fear of that jewelry box. At the cottage, she often went to the place where the apple tree used to grow. I did. I wondered what untold treasures were in there. I didn't tell my husband for a long time, so that he wouldn't want to use the warehouse. I wondered if it was really cursed. Then she confessed to her husband. He laughed for a long time, considering it a fantasy. But one day he went to the dacha and dug out a striking barrel, and in it the very box. Betty scolded her husband severely for his willfulness, and then made him bury it back. When Anna told about the boy's son Michael, Betty, of course, immediately thought of that very jewelry, but then she was tempted to use them. But recently she had a strange dream, as if she were walking through a field. Around daisies blooming, dragonflies flying. The sun is shining so brightly, beauty in a word. Suddenly, there is a noise above her head, a scream. Anna looks up into the sky, and there is a white bird flying and something in its claws is clutched. A kite is circling nearby, screaming and shouting. And then the white bird flew down with a stone. It flew to Tatiana and hit her with its wing and gave birth to its claws. A box fell at the woman's feet. "Save me," she heard your voice, as if a bird had shouted it. She woke up with Betty and couldn't understand. What was the dream about? She told her husband Nick. He just snorted and said he should watch less sci-fi movies. And then they looked at each other. He went pale, realizing what the dream meant. Maybe it's time. Betty asked hesitantly. Who knows? Maybe it is. Nick shrugged his shoulders. Well, what if the jewelry is cursed and it won't do any good? Betty, you know how Anna feels, don't you? Yeah, it's a shame about the kid. What if it helps? And I think your grandmother made up more about the curse. And the fact that grandfather died, it's not the jewelry's fault. Do you know how many people died back then? Betty agreed with her husband. So they went to the cottage and dug up the jewelry box. Then she went to her daughter's house. And now, sitting at the table in the spacious kitchen together with her daughter, they were deciding how to proceed. And frankly, surprised you surprised me, Mom shook her head Ioapa. About the curse, of course, I do not believe. And these jewels can really help save Jack. But how to use them? You'd have to sell them, wouldn't you? That's what I'm thinking, my daughter. We need to find someone reliable. Do you have such a person in mind? Anna just shrugged her shoulders. There didn't seem to be anyone. Perhaps only James is Michael's faithful assistant and friend. He must not fail. The next morning, having seen her mother off at the bus stop, Anna went to James's office. He was having a loud discussion with the accountant in his office. Greetings, Anna, he nodded when he saw the owner. Here we are deciding with Valentina how much grain to give to the people on it. Then they shook their heads slightly. Anna, at least 2 are needed. But Anna, then for sale, how much less will be? Wendy exclaimed. And we still have taxes to pay. The loans are hanging without Michael. The case with a squeak still went on. Enough for everything. Anna answered uncertainly and looked questioningly at James. We should talk. Let's go to my office. The manager obediently followed her, and there was Anna in the study, and told him her family secret, asked him to help sell the treasure. There should be enough to pay for Jack's treatment, and we can pay off all our debts. She said at the end of her story, and again she looked questioningly at the manager. You can help James. We need to find the right person. I understand you can just hand it over as a treasure and get your 25%. But how long would that take? Jack, I need an operation right away. James promised to help, and just a couple days later he told me that there is such a person. Together, they went to the city to a jeweler, Yilong Hai Tung, looking at the contents of the box, and then promised his assistance. And in 2 more days she received a very decent sum. It should have been enough for the operation and the running costs of the household. Did he sell the jewelry to someone from the jeweler? Anna wasn't interested. It was none of her business. The jeweler only said that a very rich man bought them. Let him use it for his own good. Not Jack. It had to be saved. Soon the kid underwent surgery in one of the capital's clinics. The boy quickly recovered. And by Christmas, Anna was able to take the child to her home. She was able to legally adopt the boy. The guardianship office convinced her to get a guardianship. It's more profitable that way. There will be an additional payment from the state. and when the child grows up, she will also get an apartment from the state. But he decided to be firm husband's child. This is her child, and she herself can raise him. And he will be a real son for her. Without any support from the state herself will cope. It is not for money that she takes him. 3 years passed. Anna and Jack lived in the village. During this time, Anna has mastered the position of the head of the farm and very confidently managed the business. James was still around as a faithful assistant. The farm worked in full force. People worked hard. Anna was happy. Her husband was happy for her. And Michael would also be pleased, knowing that Jack was now alive and well with her. The boy went to the village kindergarten, was a very smart, quick-witted boy. Anna could not be pleased with her son. Jack read poetry well, sang songs with pleasure at matinees and kindergarten. He was always the most active and the most artistic. Anna admired her son, rejoiced at his little victories, and Jack loved his mother very much. How many flower beds he tore in the yard, collecting bouquets for Mom. How many times he put his knees up, catching butterflies to give to Mom for flowers. Anna baby did not scold, only sighed and smiled, smeared his knees with green and blue on the wounds. And he patiently kept silent with annoyance, wrinkling his nose, because he had never caught a butterfly. And how happy my mother would be, but Anna understood her son's sadness. She explained that a butterfly is good because it flies, flutters, and when you catch it, you put it in the palm of your hand. It will die. When you see a beautiful butterfly, just call me. We will admire together, she told her son. Jack nodded understandingly. Oh, how many times Anna ran to see those butterflies. Not all, of course, were so beautiful, but she awed when she saw and Kapusniki, and even the usual moth doe smiled, was able to please his mother. She lived for her son, thought only of him. On men did not even look, although the young deceased often drew the attention of other farmers and the district authorities. At one time, he began to show her signs of attention himself. The head of the district, Anna did not know how to refuse him, so as not to offend and not to make an enemy. If only he was young and unmarried, but he was already under 60 years old and had grandchildren. Then James helped, several times before the eyes of the head. Then Anna will take Anna by the hand, then in her ear something spikes no. She realized that her loyal manager, she played it right. But the head understood in his own way, decided that the young farmer is already busy. And since James was almost friendly, he decided to stay out of it. And then he calmed down, and James and I no longer had to play the heroic lover. No one did. Jack grew up in love and care. Michael's parents often came to see their grandson. Sometimes Anna's parents also dropped by. Yes, the kid had enough care and attention. And only sometimes the 5-year-old would ask his mom, "Where is his dad?" "Our daddy is in the sky." Anna sighed and hugged her son. The boy looked at the sky and could not understand where his daddy was hiding there and why. The others have their dads nearby. And this moment was the only thing that marred the boy's cloudless existence. "Don't be sad, baby," Anna said to him. "I'm here for you." And the son hugged her tightly around the neck. "Mommy, I love you so much," Jack whispered in Anna's ear, and she would hug him. At times like that, she was the happiest. She's a mom, and that's all that matters. Often after Jack was put to bed, Anna would sit by the window and look at the stars. She reminisced about her past life with Michael. Yes, they had been happy, and it still hurt a little that he wasn't around, and would never be again. And it would probably drive her crazy if Jack hadn't miraculously appeared in her life. Yes, on the one hand, she should have been angry at her husband, accusing him of cheating. On the other hand, was it cheating? She was grateful. Grateful to her husband for his mistake. After all, she was the one who had allowed her to become a mom, even if it was in this way. Anna was even grateful that Jenna had left the baby at the orphanage. Otherwise, she wouldn't have met again. Now he was the most native, the most beloved, the most. It happened in the middle of November. It was a day off. The first snow had fallen since the night, and it was white outside. Anna had started the dough for pies in the morning. And when Jack woke up, the house already smelled of fragrant baking. Pies. asked the boy, looking at his mother in the kitchen and rubbing his sleepy eyes. Pies. Anna smiled, taking a tray out of the oven with puffy pastries. Your favorite with apples. Go to the bathroom to wash up and to the table twice. I didn't have to beg for a can. He quickly ran to the bathroom and his bare feet were already slapping back. Anna listened with a smile when the son appeared in the kitchen at his mother's house, and even his hair was deliberately frowning. Why are you barefoot on the cold floor? Who's going to cough? Not I, said Jack, climbed on a stool and already a petitioner, added Mom, and let's go outside after breakfast, there is snow. Yes, it's winter. Bending my line, and you want a sheet. Come on, Mom, the son pouted his lips. I want to make a snowman. All right, let's go make a snowman. Let's just eat some pies. Jack smiled happily and dangled his bare feet on the stool. Anna only sighed, brought her son's slippers and pulled them on his feet, then waved at the top of his head some more. They enjoyed their breakfast. Then they gathered outside. It was a fairy tale in the yard. Flakes of white snow covered everything, trees, fences, and buildings. Everything seemed to be wrapped in a solid blanket of snow. And at the same time, it was so warm and the snow on the ground was so soft. Anna and her son were making snowmen, throwing snowballs at each other. They were laughing and fooling around. They immediately, and did not notice how near their house was getting dark foreign car, and out of it came a man of about 35 years. He stood a little at the fence with a smile, looking at the fun, mother and son. Then he opened the gate. Hearing the clatter of a flask, Anna turned her head and raised her eyebrows in surprise. This was a man she did not know. Excuse me, are you Anna? The man asked uncertainly. Who are you? Anna answered cautiously. And I'm what you might call an hare. Hare? The woman was surprised. And what do you follow in my house? No, you misunderstood me. The man hesitated. I came to see you to talk about jewelry. He turned slightly pale. She was about to deny everything, as the man beat her to it. No, you don't think I have a problem with you. I just want to know everything. First, let me introduce myself. Robert. I'm the great-grandson of a merchant. Hearing the surname of the jewelry merchant whom Anna had sold a few years ago, the woman turned even paler, and the man, seeing her reaction, hurriedly explained everything. Robert was born and raised in the capital city. His parents told him a story when he was still a child, how his great-great-grandfather lived in a small town back then. He was a merchant. Then he had to flee with his whole family. The plans were to get to England, but didn't have enough finances to get across the border. The merchant was counting on his wife's jewelry, but she couldn't save it when they were fleeing from the manor. They had to hide. For several years, he lived with his family in the woods, hiding from the authorities, but then they were still found. True, by that time the great-great-grandfather was seriously ill. Soon he died. The new authorities did not persecute the widow. They even called her to work on the collective farm. Then her children worked in that very collective farm. By honest labor, the family proved that you can rely on them. Then many things happened in life. In the end, Robert's father was able to go to the capital. There he studied, got married, found a family. He himself knew little about the past of his ancestors, but only remembered either a story or the truth. Allegedly, his great-great-grandfather had jewelry. Some of them were even engraved. Ethan and Daria were the names of the merchant and his wife. What happened to the jewelry? We don't know. Robert studied history and taught at a university in the capital. One day at the retest, there was such a case one of the students could not answer the simplest ticket. Robert shook his head regretfully, saying, I'll wait for the next time. And this is already the commission. The girl was torn and suddenly reached for her earrings and put them in front of the teacher. These are rare teardrop earrings, she said. Take it, just give it a C, please. Robert looked angrily at the girl and wanted to throw a bribe. As suddenly noticed on the earring engraving and in the count, and Daria immediately in memory recalled the stories of his father, the history of his family. Robert asked the student where the earrings came from. She calmed down a little and told him that her father had given them to her and that he had bought them for a lot of money at an auction. Robert was curious if it was the same jewelry that his great-grandmother had lost. He asked the student for his father's phone number, gave her the long-awaited C, and gave her the earrings. Don't throw away such gifts, he advised her one last time. The stunned girl joyfully galloped out of the classroom, and Robert afterwards called her father, asked about the auction. Then came out on the owner of the jewelry on the jeweler. Little by little, he gathered all the information and found out about Anna. "Do you want money?" asked Anna. "When I realized everything. To be honest, I wouldn't say no," smiled Robert. "But in general, I came to find out how you got this jewelry." And now Anna told her story. Of course, without details, the very essence. About the fact that after her husband's death, her son needed an urgent operation, and only thanks to those jewelry it was possible to do it. "Well, is it nice that this jewelry helped to save your son's life?" Robert smiled. "Now I know for sure that it wasn't all fiction. It was real. Don't worry, I won't charge you anything. You did the right thing, and the jewelry may make some people happy now. I've lived without them, and I'll continue to live without them." Anna looked at the guest already with surprise. What a noble man. She invited him into the house, where she treated him with cakes and tea. Jack was always hanging around. "What a nice baby you have," Robert remarked. "Does he look like you?" I think Anna only blushed a little and smiled. Of course, Jack didn't look like her. He looked less and less like Michael as he grew older. But that didn't stop him from being the most beloved and important person in Anna's life. Robert sat for a while, thanked for the warm meeting, and said goodbye. Anna then all day wondered what a weirdo this man traveled hundreds of kilometers just to learn about the past. And very honorable. He could have demanded money from Anna. But no, he didn't. Winter has passed, spring has come ringing and bubbling. Everyone in the village fussed, buried here in yards and vegetable gardens. She disappeared until the night at work, then in the office, then in the field, then in the district center on business went. Jack went to the kindergarten in the morning, and in the evening his neighbor took him from there. Anna agreed with her. It was not difficult for Kate to do it, and she liked to take care of her little neighbor. Her children lived in the city long ago, and her grandchildren were grown up. Sometimes her granddaughter brings her great-grandson, but it happens once a year. And the old lady liked to play with children so much. So she jumped, duplicated the little neighbor. One day after kindergarten, Kate brought Jack to her house, occupied him with another coloring, and went to the vegetable garden to sow carrots. Suddenly, the old woman sees a cab stopped near Anna's house. A slender young blonde woman got out of it and walked confidently into the yard. "Who do you want?" Kate shouted to her. "The landlady is still in the field." Curled her lips, the stranger. "I see. Can I take a message?" "No need. I'll come back next time." The stranger got into a cab and sped away from the village along the dusty road. Kate didn't even have time to ask her. Who was she and why did she come at all? And when Anna came to get her son, she told her everything. The blonde? Anna was surprised. "I don't know who that could be." "Oh, well, she'll have to come back." A month passed. After the sowing season, there was a little rest for the villagers, and Anna relaxed a little. One day, she and her son decided to go to the lake for a swim. They just came to the threshold, and they met a woman walking along the path. Tall, slender, beautiful, blonde hair. She knew at once it was the blonde Kate had mentioned. But who was she? And Jenna, Jack's mother, instead of saying hello, the woman said. She didn't even glance in the direction of the boy, who stood next to Anna and stared at Anna, and she was confused at what she heard. "Jenna, is that the one? Why did you come here?" she asked quietly. "I want to take my son," Jenna answered and grinned insolently. "I gave birth to him." He heard the whole conversation, but understood little. He only looked from his mom to the beautiful aunt and back again. Anna returned to the house, promising that they would go to the lake later. Now she had to talk to her guest. Jack obediently went into the room, took out the cars, and noisily began to play racing. Anna, combined with excitement, invited Jenna to the gazebo. "Yes, I agree," nodded, and the first went down the path in the gazebo, sat down on the seat, and looked around evaluating. "Anna bade that hear you," she said. "Is it all Mike rebuilt, or have you already?" "It does not matter." Anna replied flatly. "Please explain the purpose of your visit." I told you I want to take my son. Jenna humbled herself, but with a look. Yes, and what did Meshkov found in you that apparently was not in Tun? Anna answered and continued further. Why did you think you had something to do with my son? I knew it. I adopted him from an orphanage. Even if you did, no court is going to give that baby back to you. You're right to point out that I adopted Jack after you gave him up in the hospital. I didn't have the money to treat him. A little squeaky-voiced Jenna. And you don't get to tell me how to live my life. I'm not. I'm just not giving up my son. Get out of here. She stood in front of Jenna, arms crossed. She was determined. She was going to take this insolent lady by the scruff of the neck and throw her out of the yard. Why do you want someone else's baby? Jenna asked with a sneer. Can't you have your own? None of your business. It's my child and my husband's. What are you talking about? Jenna laughed in her voice. I'm especially fascinated by the way you say my baby. How is it yours? It has nothing to do with Michael either. That's where you lie. Anna grinned too. Michael did the tests. I saw the test results myself. He's Jack's father. I don't think so. And Jenna, putting her foot on her leg, told Anna how it really was. At the time she slept with Michael, she was already pregnant. It was a small term, and the baby's father had moved on. And then Michael came along, a successful, confident married man. So what? Jenna was sure Michael would believe her. After all, he couldn't forget his first true love, her Jenna. Michael is an honorable man who wouldn't abandon a pregnant woman. And he took it from his mouth and started spouting something about loving his wife, about how their night with Jenna was a mistake. Maybe Jenna wouldn't give up so easily. But then the baby's real father showed up again. Not a poor man either, by the way. And maybe everything would have worked out, but he died in an accident. And Jenna was left alone with a baby under her heart, and she felt so sorry for herself. Everyone had cheated her. What did she need that baby for? To survive in this cruel world. And when the hospital told her that the baby had health problems, there was no more doubt. She decided to give up the boy. But her resentment towards Michael persisted. She told him that she had fathered a child with him and abandoned it. Why? Yes, to torment this noble citizen and perhaps even bankrupt him. Jenna knew how much the operation cost. It was a lot of money. Michael had to sell everything to cure the baby. Yes, she was sure Michael would be looking for a son. And so he did. And in that very orphanage, a friend of hers worked as a nanny. She whispered that Michael had shown up. She also told Jenna that he'd taken a DNA test. The test was easy. There was only one lab in town, and Jenna's friend worked there. Jenna talked her into tampering with the test, allegedly to get Michael back. But in reality, she didn't need him anymore, and neither did the baby. By then, she'd met a new boyfriend, a rich Italian guy twice her age. But it was nothing. Jenna watched from afar as Michael ran around with the baby, looking for money, and waited to see how it would end. And then it just didn't seem to matter. A rich Italian man asked her to marry, and Jenna flew to Milan. She was triumphant. Things were finally going to work out in her life. She could forget about money, resentment, men, and even that baby. She had a new life. Anna heard Jenna and couldn't believe it was true. So Michael was deceived too, and Jack is not his son. Of course, Jenna's words could be doubted, but they were more like the truth. Anna saw that Jack was growing up, becoming more like Michael. There was no downs right away. It was just the same eye color that looked like him. Anna had convinced herself that Jack was a copy of Michael, and Michael's parents wanted to believe it. And the boy doesn't look like Jenna. So there really was a third person. God Jack, not Michael's son, from realizing that. Anna burst into tears. She could barely control her emotions and asked calmly, why did you need a son now? A lot of things had changed. Jenna looked at Anna defiantly with a slight squint in her eyes. It turned out that my husband Matteo wants a child, but he has problems. And as it turns out, I can't give birth anymore. We even wanted to adopt. But then I confessed that I had my own child. We thought about it and decided it would be better if he lived with us. Jenna didn't tell me her Italian husband was furious when he found out that his beloved wife had once given birth and abandoned his own child. Even wanted a divorce. So Jenna begged him to forgive her, and he agreed to do so. But on one condition: if she went and came back with the baby. There was no choice. Jenna agreed. Back home, she learned of Michael's death, that his wife had adopted the boy. Jenna was pleased that the boy had had surgery, so she wouldn't have to mess with him about with this problem. She didn't need Jack, but she couldn't lose the motel. And feelings had nothing to do with it. The motel was rich, and that was all that mattered. She stared at the insolent guest in confusion. What Jenna had said about Jack had been a shock, of course. But in any case, Jack was still her son, even if not by Michael, even if he was a stranger by blood. But at the same time, he was her nearest and dearest. She wouldn't give her baby to that painted doll. "Get out of my house, or I'll call the police," Anna said confidently and pointed Jenna to the path to the gate. "You shouldn't do that," Jenna shrugged. "The baby is mine, and any forensics will prove it. I'll get good lawyers and I'll get Jack back. No court in the world would go for that. You abandoned a sick and defenseless child. You had your own life while he was choking on seizures. You didn't care if he lived or died. You were living in your Italy and feeling fine with you all the while I was his mother. All right then. Goodbye, mother." With a grin said Jenna and added goodbye for now. "I will definitely come back for my son." And she left, with a grin on her lips. Outside the gate, the engine started and the car door slammed. The car drove away, taking the unpleasant guest with it. Anna sat in the gazebo. Her mood was completely ruined. In the bathtub, neither son Michael. This thought developed her mind. She did not notice how out of the house ran out of the bath and headed towards her. The baby approached and put his arm around Anna's shoulders. From surprise, the woman shuddered. "Mom, I scared you." The little boy became alarmed. "What are you, my darling?" "I was just thinking," smiled Anna and hugged her son tightly. "Mom, where that aunt left. What did she want?" "Yes, so Sonny on work, one question solved," came up with Anna. She thought about it and added, "Son, if that aunt ever comes to our house or you see her on the street, don't go with her, don't talk to her. Mommy, she's bad. Very bad. You got it memorized. Don't go with her." Baby agreed, nodded in response, and immediately reminded about the lake. "Sure, son, let's go swimming. We were going to." Anna came to her senses, and she, taking her son's hand firmly, headed down the path through the vegetable garden. There behind the vegetable garden sat a clean and clear lake. The locals loved to vacation here. Anna and Jack both bathed and sunbathed. Little by little, the emotions in Anna's soul settled down. And then, returning home, the woman thought, what, in fact, had changed? Yes, it was a pity that Michael turned out not to be Jack's father. Although that Jenna shouldn't be believed. But even so, I love my son and I'm not giving him to anyone. Jenna has no rights to him. The only thing is how to tell Michael's parents that Jack is not their own. Anna realized that this information could hurt Michael's elderly parents. They lived only with thoughts of their favorite grandson of their blood. What's the result? No blood. Nothing left after her son. She decided not to say anything to Michael's parents. She didn't tell anyone about her meeting with Jenna. The woman hoped that this insolent person would never come into her life or her son's. And so they walked home from the lake. The sun affectionately hugged her shoulders to the warm wind. Somewhere in the bushes, tinkling grasshopper was rolling. They held their son's hand tightly. Jack chattered and chattered something childishly. The woman listened, nodding in response, while thinking of her mama. Suddenly she heard Jack's voice. That Sonny shook. She shook her head as if chasing away anxious thoughts. You're not listening to me, are you? Do you have to lip, Jack? What are you, little? I'm listening. I'm just thinking a little bit. I'm sorry. What were you saying? I was saying I love you very much and I love you. Anna crouched down in front of her son, hugging his arms tightly. Jack trustingly circled her neck. Anna's heart was joyfully nourished by her son, her most beloved and dear son. No one will take him away from her. Jenna, meanwhile, was on her way back to town. Sitting in the cab, she mentally worked out a plan how she could get Jack. As a matter of fact, she wasn't interested in Jack herself. She had only glimpsed him in the village, only noting that he looked like his own father, who had died in an accident. That's better. She thought she was raising her beloved husband's child. Jenna thought with a chuckle about Anna. She fondly remembered Anna's reaction when she found out about the fake DNA test. Trying to appear calm, nearly cried herself. Jenna was amused and delighted at this could-do rivalry. Hurt. Michael chose her then. Let him have it now. But how to get Jack back? Jenna realized that in court she would have problems. Even the strongest lawyers wouldn't take the case. She expected Anna to give up the baby when she learned the truth. But it turned out that didn't work. She's better attached to the baby. We have to figure something out. She's been thinking for a month, hatching a plan. Ever since that first trip to the village when she didn't find her home. And now the meeting has taken place. She had to do something. In Town N, Jenna had the most expensive hotel room in the country. She could afford a motel, not yet restricted in her means. Of course, she could have stayed at her mother's apartment where Jenna had grown up. But she was disgusted to think of the Khrushchevs she had lived in before. And in fact, all her past life was different now. And to keep it all, she would fight. Jenna didn't even call her mother to inform her about her arrival. She thought it was unnecessary. All that sentiment, the month she'd been living in the city. Jenna preferred to savor her superiority. She liked to throw money around, to see the admiring glances of the staff. After the second trip to the village, she called the same friend who had helped her with the genetic test. Julia was still working in the laboratory. When she heard the voice of her old friend, Julia tensed up a little. What do you want again? She tried to forget that story and didn't want to have any more dealings with Jenna, because she realized that where Jenna was, there was a catch. But her friend said something on the phone, saying that she had flown in for a week from Milan and just wanted to meet. Finally, Julia agreed. They met in a cafe, sat, and talked nicely. Julia waited for her friend to say the main thing. Finally, Jenna was ripe. Julia, do you want to go to Italy? I can introduce you to a very powerful man there. My Matteo has a friend. He's in his 60s, but he's very good looking. He's also fabulously rich and a widower. Jenna winked conspiratorially. I think he'll like you. We'll go to boutiques together, take vacations. How do you like it here? Cautiously answered Julia. Oh, come on. She's not fooling herself. It's good for her to be over 30 and all alone. I'm right. Well, and look how beautiful you are. Men don't appreciate you. And why do you need a bunch of trash? There's a real millionaire over there. I'm sure you'll do well with him. Will you fly with me? No, Jenna, I wouldn't dream of it. I'm fine here. Okay, I gotta go. Julia got up, but her friend grabbed her arm. You don't want to marry a millionaire. Then you'll go to jail, Jenna said quietly. Sit down. What are you talking about? Julia turned pale and obediently sat down. Have you forgotten the DNA story? I haven't forgotten. Well, I could whisper it to the police, and that would be interesting. Why would you do that? You're the one who's involved. What did I do? The test came out. Jenna let go of her friend's hand. I could have asked you for anything, but it's not like I committed a service crime. You did everything, if you remember, for free. I honestly believe you wanted Michael back. Muffled, Julia replied. And I'm just us, smiled Jenna. But you can't prove that. Just like you can't prove you didn't take the money. What do you want? Among me with the right people who can pick up the baby and take it across the border, I'll pay you well. Are you out of your mind? Don't yell, said Jenna. And don't act like a girl. You work in a place where all sorts of people turn and not easy. So think about who I can turn to. Did you ever think I might report you to the police? And what will you say? That you cheated an honest man 5 years ago. This conversation, you can't prove anything. Julia realized only now that she made a mistake by not turning on the tape recorder. A recording would be good now, she sighed. On second thought, I'll try to help you. But afterward, forget my phone number and forget I exist at all. Sure, honey. If you don't want to meet a promising man, yeah, go ahead. You snapped at Julia, got up and left, and the next day she did call Jenna. There's a man who can help you, but I'm not sure, Julia said. You call him yourself and talk to him. And she dictated a phone number to Jenna. This man was a criminal figure in town. He went to the clinic when he suspected his wife of cheating on him and thought his son wasn't his. The man's fears were in vain. He left the clinic quietly, but his phone number remains. Julia heard that the flow of nurses about the activities of this man, but immediately did not pay attention. Gossip, nothing more. But now I remembered. Found the number in the file cabinet and gave it to Jenna. Let her talk to him herself. That and the criminal identity was a Jacob. He's a really complicated man. When he got a call from an unknown woman making an appointment, he thought that another lady decided to settle scores with her husband or lover. But when Jenna explained what needed to be done, Jacob at first refused, especially because it is very troublesome to deal with delivery abroad. But when Jenna told him the fee, he thought about it. Okay, let's give it a try. He finally agreed. Anna woke up early that morning. There was an uneasy feeling in her soul. Anna stretched, took a deep breath. Apparently, she had a bad dream, but she couldn't remember which one. Stop worrying about it. Anna, time to get up, the woman said to herself. And indeed, there was a lot of work for today. The men are retiring today. We must supervise the work. Anna had a quick breakfast, stopped by Jack's. Her bunny is asleep. She smiled and then sighed. Her son again will be without her all day. The daycare is under renovation. Good thing Kate is always on hand. Just when she thought of her neighbor, she heard the door creak open. Here you are, Kate. What are you going to the neighbor? Asked the old lady. The idea is that you and I can manage on our own. I'll cook something for him now. He'll wake up for breakfast, and then we'll go to my garden. Raspberries are coming up. We'll pick them. And then we'll find something else to do. Don't worry. Your little boy will be well looked after. I'm not worried. Kate, you are my main assistant. What would I do without you? Anna smiled gratefully. She got into the car and drove out of the village to the forest, where the farm equipment was already making noise. On the way, Anna thought, maybe she should have sent Jack to town to Michael's parents or to her own. Both of them offered to look after you this month, while the daycare center was being repaired, but she couldn't even imagine being left without her son for even 24 hours. And my son would miss you. Yes, only on the grandmother neighbor, and there is all hope. Having checked the work of Kosarev, Anna together with James hurried to the district center. Suddenly, they were summoned to the agricultural department to sign documents. They returned from the district center close to lunchtime. Anna dropped James off and drove to her house. On the way, she met a dark SUV. The woman thought it was someone else's car. I wonder who was visiting? Then she drove up to her yard, seeing the open door. Anna frowned. This isn't right. What was it Kate hadn't followed? What if Jack was running away? Or the neighbor's chickens would come in and block all her flower beds? Then she heard a faint scream and cry from the house. Anna rushed there. Kate was lying on the floor, crying and trying to get up. Kate, what's wrong? Shouted Anna, ran over to her neighbor and helped her up. Oh, nurse, trouble. I did not follow the water and wiping her tears. The old lady told how she and Jack and came from the vegetable garden with fresh raspberries. Kate was in the kitchen. Berries with milk and sugar mixed to dessert kettle, boiling in the bathtub in the hallway, with which Jack played. Suddenly a car stopped outside the house. Dark so Kate had not seen it before. Two stout men entered the house. One of them grabbed Jack in his arms, and they turned toward the door. Kate ran out to meet them. Then one of the strangers pushed the old woman. Kate fell, hit her head, and lost consciousness for a few moments. When she came to her senses, neither the bandits nor the child were in the house. Anna, forgive me, I didn't save our Jack. The old lady was crying. Kate, don't blame yourself for anything. Anna said in a trembling voice, what would you do against two bandits? God, why would they want Jack? Anna called an ambulance and the police, and jumped into her car and followed the bandits. Now she knew exactly what kind of car she had seen on the way. There was only one road, and Anna was sure she would catch up with the bandits. She raced along the dusty road, but in vain. The woman stopped the car, dropped her head on the steering wheel, and sobbed. She was afraid to imagine where her baby was now, what he was experiencing. And then she froze. She realized who could have taken her baby. It was Jenna. There was no one else. And just as she thought about it, how did a police car show up on the road? It was a task force on their way to her call. Anna jumped out of the car and began to explain to the investigator who she was, what had happened. She voiced her suspicions. Well, let's not waste any time. The investigator agreed with her arguments and called his colleagues in the regional center to find out more about this Jenna and, if possible, detain her. Law enforcers promptly began to work, but the only person they found was Jenna. She did not live quietly in her hotel room, and when the police guards swooped in on her, was in complete bewilderment, took the child. Rounded her eyes. Oh, really? How could I have organized all this? The coroner didn't have a single clue. The number of the car that came to the village. No one remembered only the color and make of the surveillance cameras. Of course, there were none along the road. The investigator suggested another version, maybe he was taken for ransom. But so far no one had called. She was sure it was Jenna's doing. And while all the cops were investigating, Marjane, all sorts of men were also on the job under James' direction. The men searched the neighborhood for woods, lakes, abandoned houses, but they couldn't find anything. In the meantime, Jacob had brought little Jack to the mountains. Jacob was glad that he had managed to skip all the checkpoints of the traffic police so successfully. Driving on a road where cameras are minimal, he wasn't too worried about that. The plates on the car weren't real. And the driver was wearing a cap. He's in the backseat with the kid. In short, nobody's gonna find them. Jacob left Jack at the abandoned house. In the evening on another car, he planned to take the child to the border region. And there he has friends who will help to transport the boy. One thing made him a little uneasy. The child was scared, crying all the time and calling for his mother. Jacob was not a beast, and he felt sorry for the boy. He already regretted that he got involved in this adventure, but there was a decent sum at stake, and it was too late to back out. Why are you crying? He pleaded with Jack. We'll go to your mom soon. Really, wiping away tears, the child asked and looked trustingly into the eyes of this big uncle. Of course. Mommy asked me to bring you. Why did you hit Granny Katya? Who hit her? She just fell down. She's all right now. Jacob consoled the child and made a vow not to get involved in such cases again. And maybe he would have succeeded. But then the police got an anonymous call. It was a woman, and she said she knew who had taken the child. She gave the name Jacob. Then it was just a matter of time. Law enforcement located Jacob. Soon he and the driver were apprehended on the way out of town. In the back seat was Jack. When they reported that the boy was found, the woman almost fainted from excitement and then cried. But already her little one had been found. It's been over a year. All those responsible for that story have been punished. Jacob and his partner got decent sentences. Jenna was also convicted for organizing the crime. In addition, her Italian husband divorced her. Julia, who called the police, got off lightly. The court took into account her assistance to the investigation, and she went as a witness. However, she was fired from the lab. Management did not want a person with a questionable past working in their institution. At the trial, of course, many facts came out, such as the fact that Jack was not Michael's son. Michael's parents were very upset when they found out, but eventually they calmed down and accepted Jack as their own. Anna's parents were also very surprised. But how can you refuse a little man who firmly entered their family? Anna and her son lived in their village. Those terrible events began to be forgotten. And then Anna had another meeting with a man she already knew a little. But who would have thought that fate would bring them together? Spring that year was not in a hurry. At the end of April, it was still snowing straight orange at night. Anna was worried it was time to plow the fields, or to drive the tractor. It will get stuck in the field up to its ears. And the deadline is pressing in June. The heat will crush it. And the sprouts, if they don't have time to gain strength, will be pulled out. What kind of harvest will we have in the end? James sighed too. The weather is not good for farmers this year. And then somehow in a couple of days, the weather explained the sun heating soaked through. It soaked the water and the ground. The work was booming. Anna was amused, James encouraged. He had plans to open up a spit between the shards. There the winds would not blow so much, and the moisture would be preserved if the summer was dry. Anna agreed with the manager's decision. The case says the plot has been registered for her for a long time. There are no problems. This year the field is plowed once, and then the grain is sown. It's going to produce good wheat. James laughed, saying that he had become a real agronomist over the years, that she had learned to understand the business for so many years. And one morning the tractors came to this plot. The mechanizers knew their business, soon worked, and there was a small hill there by the forest. It had always been there as long as the locals remembered, but no one had ever attached any importance to it. Well, it was blown by the wind for many centuries, so the tractor driver decided to store this hill too. Why does it stand idle? He drove once in the election into the ground for the second time, and then he saw something plowing in the forest. He nodded, went out to look. I thought the tractor's spare parts had fallen off. I came closer and my eyes. In the ground, some shards, some iron pieces. Another tractor driver drove up, scratched Jack in the back of his head. We seem to have opened a mound. He guessed. Oh, come on. What kind of mound we might have here? I don't know what kind. But people used to live here. And notice, in the Soviet years, they didn't plow here. Why? Maybe they knew about the mound, and then everything was forgotten. So maybe we'll write it down quietly, and they'll have problems later. You can't be patted on the head for such things. They've had enough of our ducks. The tractor driver agreed, having opened the hill. It should be said that farm workers often called one thing among themselves simply Anna or Duck. Kindly so fondly. Yes, the workers appreciated their young mistress, respected, knowing what a hard fate fell to her. The mechanics called. They told her everything. Soon she came with James. What is it? Anna asked in amazement. Examining the pieces of clay shards, it was obvious that the ancient they decided to call archaeologists out of sin. Let them decide how to proceed. Because if it is recognized later, you cannot avoid fines. A couple of days later, the specialists arrived, settled in a tent near the forest, and began to study, to dig out the very hill. Anna has a lot of work to do. Still, she wondered what the archaeologists had found there. One afternoon, she drove up to the excavation site. 4 men were just resting, drinking tea in a clearing. Hello, Anna. One of them said hello first. Come to us to drink tea. Anna wondered how this archaeologist knew her. I don't think we've met. Taking a closer look. Strong build, stocky with a small beard. Or have you seen him around? Didn't recognize her? The man smiled. I'm Robert, remember, came to see you. Anna gasped. Exactly the same Robert who was searching for his family's treasure. She was so afraid he'd ask her for compensation for the jewelry. Well, no, it's a good thing we parted ways, Robert. So you're an archaeologist now. I used to be an archaeologist. I teach at the Institute. And then we got word that they found a burial mound. So I decided to check it out with my colleagues. Then maybe I'll bring my students here for an internship. Do you mind? How could I mind? Anna smiled. Who's going to ask me much? It will probably be a shame that you had to stop working. There is a little, but nothing, we'll get over it. You sit down and have tea with us. We were talking like this. Anna joined the group of archaeologists. Robert and his colleagues turned out to be sociable guys. They chatted, they laughed. Anna left the field in a good mood. So much for the field. Let the historians work. Soon it turned out that this mound was actually valuable. In it were found objects of everyday life of people, other tribes. Robert began to see Anna more and more often. Sometimes he came to visit her. They spent a long time in the gazebo. Jack would hang around. What a wonderful son you have. Robert once said and sighed sadly for some reason. You have children. Careful. Anna asked. No, my wife didn't want to. She kept saying she had to live for herself. Now it's over. That everyone's separated. My wife, Robert, and I told her he'd been married for almost 10 years. His wife, Nancy, worked with him at the same institute. Everything was fine between them. And then his wife confessed that she'd met her first love. And it's been 6 months since they divorced. That's sad. But I'm sure you'll meet your love again, Anna said. You're a very good man and decent. I'm still so grateful to you. You didn't make a fuss about those jewels. You could have. I didn't do the right thing back then. I should have turned in the jewelry instead of selling it to a third party. You were saving a child? Robert answered her firmly. I had no moral right to demand anything from you. Yes, but I confess to you, I have now spent some of the money on the development of my farm. Perhaps I should reimburse you for that amount. We'll harvest in the fall. Then I'll be able to pay you back. You don't have to pay anything back. You invested the money in the development of the land, which means additional jobs, life in the countryside. I see how hard you work. I hear what people in the neighborhood are saying about you. What do they say? Anna smiled. That you are a very good leader and not a bad person. Only that only happiness is not smiling at you. So one old lady in the store said my happiness is my son. Anna nodded her head confidently. Robert smiled back and winked at Jack, who was already clearly mocking sitting next to his mom. Anna noticed it, and she wanted to take the boy in her arms. But Robert volunteered to help. He brought Jack into the house. Anna laid her son down. Then they stood in the yard looking at the stars for a long time. Anna, can I ask you another question? Robert asked, breaking the silence of the night. Anna shrugged her shoulders and nodded in response. Did you love your husband much? Anna only sighed, answered nothing, and only nodded her head again. She raised her head and looked up at the sky. Once Michael was standing next to her, and there was happiness. And then what had happened had happened. Her husband's betrayal of him and his infidelity and his remorse. And then Jack's child, essentially a stranger who had become his wife's closest family. Anna looked at Robert and said, yes, I loved Michael, but it's all in the past. And they looked at each other carefully. Then, as if remembering, they both became embarrassed and began to say goodbye. In the fall, Robert left for the city. So soon the school year would begin. He said goodbye to Anna on the way to the district center. The woman was just standing by the field and was looking carefully into the distance. Thinking about something, Robert saw her from the car and asked the cab driver to slow down. Anna turned around. Hearing the noise of the car, Robert was already rushing towards her. Anna, I already thought that I would not see you for goodbye. Was there a shadow on the woman's face? Yes, the lectures at the Institute start in a week. I have to be there. Although, to be honest, I don't really want to go back. I like the field conditions. Yes, I am accustomed to such conditions, since student in archaeological trips I really like this way of life. But this time it's for a different reason, which is I don't want to leave you. Robert looked into her eyes. Anna was confused and did not know what to answer. She too was sad that Robert was leaving. She was used to their meetings, their conversations, their walks. But to say it was beyond her. I'm sorry, what confused you? Robert said quietly. You were minding your own business. I was here. No, it's fine. I was just planning to plant a garden on this spot years ago, but Michael never got around to it. And now the idea's come to life. Do you think I can do it? You'll do fine, Robert smiled. He suddenly took her hand and kissed it, then abruptly stepped aside. See you later, and walked with a quick step to the car. See you later, Anna's lips whispered. And then it was again winter-long cold. In the late evenings, Anna put her son to bed and sat in an armchair, covered with a blanket, and remembered the events of the past years. Yes, a lot of things had happened in her life, but somehow it all turned out to be just a dream. What would happen next in her life? Again work, home, worries about her son. All that's fine and all that's right. But her heart wanted something more. Anna realized that she was chasing these thoughts away, and she just wanted love. And not just some phantom love, but real love. And there was someone she thought of all the time, Robert. But the man left, so she never called her. She did not call him, and she out of pride. Yes, sometimes she wanted to dial his phone number, but Anna restrained herself. What will she say to him? How are you? That's all. She remembered their goodbye, and her heart clenched sweetly. It seemed to her that she could still feel the touch of his lips on her palm. He never called. Then one day, just before Christmas, there was a knock at the door. Anna and Jack were just decorating the tree. Anna thought it was Kate, a frequent visitor to their house. "Kate, come in," Anna shouted. The door opened and a man in a thick down coat and a hat appeared on the doorstep. She didn't immediately realize who it was. Finally, she recognized him. "Oh, Robert." Uncle Robert joyfully shouted Jack and rushed to hug the guest. "Jack, I'm from Frost." Robert laughed joyfully and at the same time looked hesitantly at the babysitter. She stared, confused, not knowing what to say. Presently, Uncle Robert took off his jacket and hugged her. "Then you're welcome." She finally realized she didn't have to beg Robert twice. He took off his jacket, hugged Jack tightly, and then handed him some kind of package. "Here, I met Santa Claus on the street. He told me to tell you," he winked at the boy. "Oh, Uncle Robert, I'm not a little kid anymore. You bought this, didn't you?" Jack laughed and pulled a big red remote control car out of the bags. "Wow, it's so cool." The boy went to play in the room. Anna took the guest to the kitchen and poured tea. She was able to cope with her emotions and looked quite calm. "It's a surprise. I hope you enjoyed it," Robert said. He paused and added, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For not calling. I couldn't." And Robert told me what had happened to him. When he arrived in the city in mid-September, Robert had a retake with third-year students. Among the students was a certain Maria, a girl who was stupid but had rich parents. She predictably failed the exam. After Maria came to Robert at the department and begged him to give her at least a C, Robert only advised her to study the subject and prepare for the exam with the committee. "Robert, be a man. Give her a C," Maria insisted. "Maria, you are wasting my time and yours," Robert told her. He started filling out the report card. "Robert, and I can be grateful." He looked at her in surprise and only shook his head. Everyone knew that Robert was incorruptible and a teacher, but Maria had no intention of backing down. While Robert was filling out the report card, she stood next to him. He didn't even look at her, and then he looked up and went numb. Maria had unbuttoned her blouse and was staring at him intently. "Don't you want to?" Quietly, she said. "Maria, fix your clothes." Only he said. "You'll be sorry," she whispered. And then the unimaginable happened. Maria suddenly screamed loudly. Then she jumped out of the department and ran crying through the institute. She made it look as if Robert had molested her. She was against it. Then Maria told the dean that Robert had repeatedly molested her, and that's why he fired her during the exams. And Maria believed all Maria believed, largely due to the intervention of her influential father, who had roared so much indignation. Robert tried in vain to prove that it was all nonsense. He was suspended from his job. Criminal charges were filed. It is not known how it would have ended, but helped his ex-wife Nancy, although she left him for another, was still a decent person. Her current husband was a lawyer, and it was he who confused the case, insisted on a polygraph. It was only then that Maria was found to be lying. She was expelled from the university. Even her father didn't help. Before Robert, the management of the institute apologized and invited her back to work. But after everything, Robert could not imagine how he would work with students, communicate with colleagues who yesterday were ready to throw stones at him. Robert quit. What to do next? He didn't know. Yes, all this time he had been thinking about Anna, wanting to call her, to hear her voice, but he didn't dare. But just before Christmas, he suddenly realized he couldn't do that. If you love someone, you have to tell them. And there he is at Anna's. They look into each other's eyes. "I love you," Robert said quietly. "I just want you to know that. Except now, I'm not a college professor. I'm just an unemployed guy. And I guess you don't want that, do you?" "Yes," Anna whispered back. The three of them spent Christmas together, and it was the beginning of a new life. And in the spring, Robert started to work actively. The former historian turned out to be a capable worker. He was especially good at gardening. Having studied over the winter all the records and books of Anna's ex-husband, he began to organize the garden. Apple trees, cherry trees, raspberries, currants. Robert started with simple plantings. He was in the garden all day long. Sometimes he'd spend the night on the allotment. But he practically banished her from the garden when she tried to help. You got enough work to do. Go to the office," Robert used to say. Of course, he didn't work alone, he had 5 hired help. And it was very hard work, the fruits of which are not immediately visible. And so 5 years passed. On the site of the former field were colorful young trees, apple trees bent from the branches of white cherries. Rows of raspberries and currants stretched in smooth rows, studded with large berries. Robert also planted in his garden plum pear. There were apricot and apricot trees. There was a grapevine. Here for fruits and berries went not only residents of the district, but also from the region, as on excursions several times brought important officials. In short, the glory of Orchard rattled far beyond. A small village. Robert was very tired, but the orchard became his brainchild, the meaning of life. Although he had other things in mind. His family. They themselves signed just after that first Christmas they spent together. At first, Anna was all business too, but gradually she got sidetracked. The woman realized she just wanted to be a woman, an angel, and a horse. Anna stayed at home more and more, occupied with her son, created a cozy field, and the farm was now managed by James' son Timothy. He had learned all the skills from his father and was doing quite well. Sometimes Anna, looking at the ears and the orchards in the field, the cow on the rise, thought, could Michael have imagined that his business would turn out like this? He probably would have been happy. But she remembered her first husband with a slight sadness, of course. And now she loved only Robert. And 2 years after the second marriage, Anna suddenly felt bad. She felt dizzy and nauseous. Anna had some doubts, but it was unbelievable. She went to see a doctor, and the doctor at the district polyclinic rejoiced her. She's pregnant. How could that be? I was told before that there was no chance. She asked the doctor. There is always a chance, smiled the doctor. And your case is proof of that. When Robert found out about his wife's pregnancy, he was the happiest man in the world. There would soon be 4 of them. But he was a little wrong. In the 4th month, an ultrasound revealed that Anna was expecting twins. And it was a total delight. Anna gave birth to a boy and a girl on her due date. Jack was especially happy, because now he has a little brother and a little sister. And he's the big brother, their protector. The only thing that bothered the grown-up boy was whether he would be loved as before. One day he asked his mom about it. My little one. Anna smiled. Our love is not going anywhere. You will forever be our eldest and favorite boy and kin. Of course I will. Why do you ask? Jack was silent for a moment, then confessed that Grandma Tanya, Anna's mom, had recently told him to say Suritin. Jack knew that Papa Roma wasn't his own. But his grandmother's mom only sighed. Then the boy heard her talking to his grandfather. Grandma Tanya said she was working. You see, it's an omen. When you bring an orphan into the house, then your own children will be born. That's how Anna adopted Jack. That's how it worked out. The boy didn't understand everything, but the fact that his mother had adopted him was firmly planted in his mind. He didn't say anything at first. He cried quietly to his mom, and then he asked if his mom needed him. Anna had to confess to her son, but she told him 1,000 times that she had always loved him and would always love him. And Robert joined the conversation, assuring that Jack is the most, that there is a native person to them. Their love, their care soothed the child's worries. Anna told her mother everything afterward. That's who was pulling her tongue. Betty just made a sour face. It's my fault. Anna just waved her hand. What's she gonna ask of her mom? Thanks for helping me out in a difficult situation. And the fact that he said too much, so maybe it's for the best. After all, the secret is always revealed, and it is important to say everything correctly and in time. And so those 5 years passed. How Robert and Anna got married. Jack is 12, Daria and Kevin are 3 years old. The boys are very friendly. Jack is mom's first mommy's helper. He takes the kids for walks, reads books, and plays with them. Daria and Kevin are like tails after him. They love Jack and he loves them. Anna sometimes thinks, looking at her husband and children, did she ever imagine that everything would turn out this way? Certainly, there was not a terrible loss in her life that could have broken her whole life. Then the secrets that came after that loss. and her husband's infidelity could have broken her too. But she endured because then the power of motherhood was already manifested in her to the highest degree. Yes, she wanted to be a mom, and she became one. Jack's illness showed that there are a lot of wonderful people around who can come to the rescue. And family people in this situation sometimes perform a miracle. A miracle. Yes, a miracle happened in her life. When a dead-end situation became the beginning of a new path for a new turn in her life. She met Robert at first and never thought it would turn into something more. Yes, she met some bad people along the way, but life punished them. So what's next? What's next is a quiet, measured life and happiness.